Stay exactly where you are for one quiet moment, because something almost impossible has just brushed against your path, and if you listen carefully, you may recognize a message that was never meant for ordinary eyes. There are moments that arrive without footsteps. They make no sound, yet they change everything they touch. This is one of those moments. Long before you pressed play, a thought crossed someone else's heart. A thought they could not explain, could not silence, and could not forget. It became more than a memory. It became a letter. Not written with ink, but with intention. Not delivered by a hand, but carried through invisible moments that somehow keep finding you. And here is the mystery. That letter was never designed to remain forever. It exists only for those willing to notice it before it quietly fades. That is why you found this message now. Not yesterday. Not tomorrow. Now. If that sounds impossible, ask yourself something very simple. Have you ever felt as though someone remembered you at the exact second you thought of them? Have you ever smiled without knowing why, or paused in the middle of an ordinary day because something inside whispered that change was nearby? Those moments are often dismissed as coincidence. Yet coincidence has a strange habit of arriving precisely when two unseen paths begin moving toward one another. Stay with this thought just a little longer. Because the first line of that hidden letter is beginning to reveal itself. It does not start with dramatic promises. It begins with an unexpected confession. I almost convinced myself that forgetting you would be easier than believing you were real. Those words were never spoken aloud. They remained locked behind quiet days and sleepless nights. Yet every unspoken sentence carries its own energy. Every feeling searches for somewhere to land. Somehow, against every expectation, those feelings have been traveling toward you. Imagine opening an envelope that contains no paper. Only understanding. Only recognition. Only the strange comfort of realizing someone has been carrying your name through moments when you believed nobody was thinking about you. The letter continues. I kept pretending life was moving forward, but every beautiful thing reminded me that someone was still missing from the picture. Read those words slowly inside your mind. Not because they predict the future. Because they reveal the emotional truth of someone who finally stopped running from what their own heart had been trying to say. But wait. The most surprising part is not what they wrote. It is when they wrote it. This letter was formed during a moment when everything around them appeared completely ordinary. Conversations continued. Traffic moved. Phones rang. The world carried on exactly as always. Yet inside one quiet heartbeat, something shifted forever. Have you noticed how life's greatest turning points rarely announce themselves? A single realization. One silent decision. One unexpected memory. And suddenly the future begins rearranging itself without asking for permission. That is exactly where this story begins. Not with certainty. With awakening. Because somewhere beyond what your eyes can currently see, another soul finally became honest with itself. The next lines of the letter feel almost impossible to ignore. I stopped asking whether we would ever meet. Instead, I started asking why your presence still feels closer than my own doubts. Pause there. There is remarkable courage hidden inside that sentence. Not the courage to chase. Not the courage to possess. The courage to admit that some connections cannot be measured by distance alone. Perhaps this is why your own heart has been unusually restless lately. Perhaps this is why familiar places suddenly feel different. Perhaps this is why ordinary mornings seem to carry an unexplainable anticipation. What if none of those feelings arrived by accident? What if they were echoes? Tiny reflections of a letter quietly making its way toward you. You are probably wondering why the title speaks about disappearing in 5 minutes. The answer is more meaningful than it first appears. The letter itself does not vanish. The opportunity to recognize it does. Every meaningful realization has its own window. Ignore it for too long, and the moment quietly folds itself back into silence. Notice it while it is present, and everything begins looking different, even though the world itself has not changed. This is why awareness matters. Not urgency born from fear. Awareness born from possibility. The hidden message grows even more personal now. I wanted to write about forever, but I realized forever begins with one honest moment. How often do people wait for perfect timing before expressing what truly matters? Too often. Yet the heart rarely speaks according to calendars. It speaks when truth becomes heavier than silence. That is exactly what happened here. Something inside them became too real to hide any longer. Not because anyone forced them. Because pretending no longer felt honest. And before this invisible letter reaches its next page, there is one question floating quietly between every line. Could two people begin moving toward the same future before either of them fully understands why? Do not answer too quickly. Sometimes the greatest discoveries require patience instead of certainty. Because what you have heard so far is only the opening paragraph of a letter whose final sentences carry a revelation capable of changing how you understand every unexplained feeling that brought you here. And when that next page unfolds, you may finally understand why this message could never wait forever. A quiet truth is about to rise from between the lines, and this is where the letter becomes impossible to ignore. The words are no longer describing feelings. They are revealing decisions that were made in silence, long before anyone else noticed a change. The next page opens with a sentence that almost feels too honest to exist. I stopped waiting for life to give me a sign. Because every road somehow kept leading back to the thought of you. Notice what those words do. They do not ask for anything. They do not demand an answer. They simply acknowledge that some journeys circle back to the same place, no matter how many different directions we choose. There is something extraordinary about a heart that finally becomes truthful with itself. It no longer wastes energy pretending. It no longer argues with what it quietly knows. Instead, it begins collecting small moments that once seemed meaningless. A familiar melody. A place that suddenly feels important. A dream remembered only for a few seconds after waking. A conversation that unexpectedly brings your name into someone's thoughts. One by one, these moments became pieces of the same hidden letter. Perhaps you have experienced something similar. Not certainty. Just a quiet feeling that something unseen has been moving in the background of your life. Most people dismiss these moments because they cannot explain them. But not everything meaningful arrives with explanations. Sometimes clarity comes later. Sometimes understanding waits patiently until every missing piece has found its place. The letter continues. I realized I wasn't searching for a perfect person. I was searching for the peace I only felt whenever my thoughts wandered toward you. Read that sentence slowly. Peace. Not excitement that disappears overnight. Not temporary fascination. A calm certainty that gently grows stronger instead of louder. That kind of feeling cannot be rushed. It matures quietly, almost unnoticed, until one ordinary day it becomes impossible to deny. Now imagine the writer sitting alone for a moment. No audience. No expectations. No reason to impress anyone. Only honesty. The kind of honesty people rarely show the world. That is when another line appeared. I don't know exactly how our paths will cross. But I no longer believe they were meant to stay apart forever. Something changed after those words were written. Not outside. Inside. Because every future first changes within someone's thinking before it becomes visible in the world around them. That is why this letter matters. It is not describing an ending. It is describing a beginning that has quietly been preparing itself. Stay with this story a little longer. The most unexpected page has not arrived yet. There is still one sentence hidden deeper inside the letter that even the writer hesitated to admit. Before we continue, if these words have brought a little peace or curiosity into your day, you are always welcome to share your thoughts in the comments. Someone else may find comfort through your perspective. And if you enjoy journeys like this, subscribing simply means we'll continue exploring these quiet mysteries together. Now listen carefully. The handwriting almost changes here. As though every word became heavier with meaning. I used to believe timing controlled everything. Now I wonder if courage has been the missing piece all along. That single realization transformed the rest of the letter. Because once fear loses its voice, hope finally finds its own. Think about your own journey. How many beautiful possibilities have remained invisible simply because they had not reached their right moment yet? Seeds do not become trees overnight. The sunrise does not rush the horizon. The most meaningful conversations often begin with a single quiet sentence. Perhaps this letter is one of those sentences. Perhaps it is inviting you to notice possibilities instead of limitations. And then, near the bottom of the page, almost hidden between the final lines, the writer leaves one last confession before turning to the next page. If this message ever reaches you, I don't want you to remember my doubts. I want you to remember that, despite every reason to stay silent, I finally chose honesty. Those words linger. Not because they are dramatic. Because they are real. Every honest feeling carries its own quiet strength. It does not need to shout. It simply waits for the right heart to recognize it. But the letter is not finished. In fact, the next page contains something completely unexpected. Until now, every line has spoken about what the writer discovered. The page that follows reveals what they noticed about you. And once those observations appear, the entire meaning of this mysterious letter begins to transform in a way neither of you could have imagined. Look closely, because the next page does not begin with another confession. It begins with an observation so unexpectedly gentle that, for a brief moment, even the writer seems unsure whether to continue. There is a long pause. Almost as if the pen stopped moving. Almost as if the silence itself became part of the message. Then, at last, the next words appear. I think the most beautiful thing about you is something you probably don't even know exists. Not your appearance. Not your achievements. Not the image the world sees. Something much quieter. The way you continue moving forward even after moments that could have convinced you to stop. The way you still leave room for hope after disappointment. The way kindness has survived inside you, even when life gave you every excuse to become distant. That is what the writer noticed. Not because they were searching for perfection. Because they recognized authenticity. And authenticity has a remarkable way of finding another authentic heart. Have you ever wondered why certain people remain unforgettable without trying? It is rarely because they spoke the loudest. It is because they made others feel understood. The letter continues. You don't realize how many times your quiet strength became someone else's reason to believe tomorrow could still be better. Imagine reading those words for the first time. No applause. No audience. Just a simple truth written with complete sincerity. Sometimes we spend years looking for proof that our presence matters, never realizing that proof has already been quietly written into other people's lives. Perhaps that is why this letter feels different. It is not trying to convince you that you are extraordinary. It is reminding you that the smallest parts of who you are often leave the deepest impression. The writer pauses once more. You can almost picture them looking out a window, collecting their thoughts before allowing the next sentence to exist. Then they write. I was afraid that if I ever told you how much your spirit inspired me, the words would never sound big enough. Think about that. Some feelings cannot fit inside ordinary language. Some truths become smaller the moment we try to explain them. Yet they remain true. There is something deeply human about wanting another person to understand what they have meant to your journey. That is exactly what this hidden letter is trying to do. Not create fantasy. Not promise certainty. Simply reveal appreciation that remained unspoken for far too long. The next paragraph carries a different energy. It feels calmer. Steadier. Almost like someone who has finally stopped running from themselves. I don't expect life to unfold exactly as I imagine. But I hope that, if our paths truly meet, I will have the courage to show you the honesty I discovered while writing this. That single sentence changes everything. Because the letter is no longer about wondering. It is about becoming. The writer has already changed. Before any future conversation. Before any future meeting. Before any future chapter. Something inside them became lighter because they finally chose truth over hesitation. Perhaps that is the greatest gift hidden inside this letter. Not the promise of what comes next. The reminder that honesty has the power to transform a heart before it transforms circumstances. Stay here for just a little longer. The final page is closer than ever. And strangely, it does not end with a goodbye. It does not end with a dramatic declaration. It ends with something so unexpectedly simple that many people would overlook it if they hurried. One final handwritten line. One final thought. One final hope. I don't know exactly when this message will find you, but if you're reading it in the right moment, I hope it reminds you to never close your heart simply because life once asked you to protect it. Read that again. There is wisdom hidden between those words. Protect your peace. Protect your kindness. But never become so guarded that hope can no longer recognize you. The writer gently folds the letter. The edges begin to blur. The ink slowly fades into the quiet from which it first appeared. Not because the message has been lost, but because it has already reached the place it was always meant to reach. Your heart. And just before the last trace of the writing disappears, one final sentence shines more clearly than every line before it. The letter may fade, but the courage it awakened inside both of us never has. The page becomes blank. The silence returns. Yet somehow, it no longer feels empty. It feels like the beginning of a brand new chapter that had been waiting patiently for the exact moment you were ready to read its very first line. Another page has appeared, and strangely, it contains almost no words at all. For a moment, it seems as though the letter has ended. But then, as if written by light instead of ink, a final message slowly begins to reveal itself. It says, "If you have reached this page, then you stayed long enough to hear what most people never do." There is something beautiful about that. Not because the journey was mysterious. Because you chose not to rush through it. The writer knew that only a patient heart would ever discover these final lines. And perhaps that was the secret all along. The letter was never testing how quickly someone could read. It was quietly revealing who was willing to remain present. Imagine the writer smiling for the very first time while finishing these words. Not from certainty about tomorrow, but from gratitude. Gratitude that honesty finally found its voice. The final paragraphs feel warmer than everything that came before. I spent so much time wondering whether destiny was something we waited for. Now I believe it is something we quietly prepare ourselves to recognize. Those words settle gently. Because they carry no pressure. Only hope. Hope that every lesson, every unexpected delay, every unanswered question, has been shaping both hearts into people who understand love with greater patience, greater kindness, and greater wisdom than before. Perhaps that is why this letter had to disappear. Not because it was fragile. Because its purpose was never to remain on a page. Its purpose was to leave something lasting inside the person who found it. Think about everything you have heard. Not one sentence asked you to chase. Not one sentence encouraged fear. Instead, every line pointed towards something far more valuable. Become the version of yourself that recognizes genuine connection when it arrives. Because the strongest relationships are rarely built in dramatic moments. They are built through honesty. Through respect. Through choosing understanding over assumptions. Now, before the final words are spoken, let this thought stay with you. If this journey has meant something to you, if even one sentence brought a little peace, hope, or reflection, you are warmly invited to share your thoughts below. Someone reading your comment may need those words today. And if stories like this speak to your heart, subscribing simply means we'll continue sharing these quiet journeys together whenever another one finds its way here. Now, the very last sentence appears. No hesitation. No mystery left to hide behind. Only truth. My greatest wish was never that you would remember this letter forever. My greatest wish was that you would remember your own worth long after these words disappeared. The ink begins to dissolve. The page grows brighter. Every sentence that once covered it slowly fades into silence. Until only one small mark remains. A tiny heart. No signature. No name. No explanation. Because some messages are more powerful when they belong to possibility rather than certainty. You close the invisible letter. Yet something feels different. The room has not changed. The day has not changed. The world outside your window continues exactly as before. But within you, a quiet confidence has taken the place where uncertainty once lived. You realize the letter did not vanish because it was lost. It vanished because it had completed its purpose. It reminded you that meaningful connections begin with truth. That hope becomes stronger when it is patient. That kindness never loses its value. And that the most important message you could ever receive was never hidden in someone else's words alone. It was awakened inside your own heart. The letter is gone. The feeling remains. And perhaps, somewhere beyond today's horizon, another page is already waiting to be written, not by fate alone, but by every honest choice you make from this moment forward. Until then, carry this quiet light with you. Some stories disappear from sight. The best ones continue living within the person who was willing to listen. Just when it seems every word has disappeared, something unexpected happens. The empty page begins reflecting your own thoughts. Not with sentences. Not with answers. With questions. The kind that quietly remain in the heart long after a story ends. What kind of love deserves to be remembered? What kind of future is built by patience instead of fear? What kind of person do you become when you stop doubting your own value? For a few silent moments, there are no new words. Only space. And sometimes, space is where the greatest understanding finally arrives. Then, almost like the final ray of sunlight before evening, one last hidden paragraph slowly appears. I realized something while writing this letter. The person I hoped would one day read these words never needed to become someone else. They only needed to believe they were already enough. Read that again. Already enough. Not when everything is perfect. Not when every dream comes true. Not after proving yourself to the world. Right now. There is a quiet strength in accepting that truth. Because the moment you stop chasing approval, you begin attracting relationships built on sincerity instead of expectation. Perhaps that is the lesson hidden between every page of this mysterious letter. The writer was never trying to create an impossible dream. They were hoping to awaken a different way of seeing yourself. Imagine standing beside a peaceful lake at sunrise. The water is perfectly still. You cannot force it to reflect the sky. It reflects naturally when everything becomes calm. The human heart is much the same. When fear settles. When comparison fades. When unnecessary doubt grows quiet. Clarity finally appears. The letter continues with its final reflection. If our paths truly cross one day, I hope we recognize each other, not because life was perfect, but because we both chose growth instead of giving up. There is something deeply comforting about those words. They remind us that meaningful connections are not built by flawless people. They are built by people who continue learning. People who choose kindness even after disappointment. People who protect hope without becoming careless. That is rare. And rare things are always worth appreciating. Now notice something unusual. The handwriting has become lighter. Each sentence looks as though it is slowly blending into the light itself. The writer knew this moment would come. Nothing written on paper lasts forever. But truth. Truth has a different way of surviving. It lives inside choices. Inside conversations. Inside moments when someone decides to encourage instead of criticize. To forgive instead of carry bitterness. To believe instead of surrender to doubt. That is where this letter truly belongs. Not in your hands. In your heart. As these final moments arrive, listen to one last quiet confession. I no longer wish for extraordinary miracles. I simply hope that every ordinary day gives you another reason to smile, another reason to trust life, and another reason to believe that genuine kindness is never wasted. Perhaps that is the greatest love letter anyone could ever write. One that asks for nothing in return. One that celebrates hope more than certainty. One that reminds another soul that their presence has always mattered. The last trace of the invisible ink disappears. The page becomes completely blank. Yet somehow, it feels fuller than before. Because you now understand what the disappearing letter was trying to teach all along. Some messages are temporary. Some emotions pass. Some chapters quietly close. But the courage to remain open-hearted. The wisdom to keep growing. The decision to meet each new day with quiet confidence. Those things never disappear. So as you leave this story behind, carry only what serves you. Carry peace. Carry patience. Carry gratitude. And whenever life places an unexpected moment in front of you, remember the letter that vanished in 5 minutes. Not because time erased it, but because its true destination was never the page. It was always the person who was willing to receive its meaning. One final echo remains, not in the letter, but in the silence it left behind. Listen carefully. Have you noticed how the quiet feels different now? It is no longer the silence of waiting. It is the silence that follows understanding. For a brief moment, close your eyes in your imagination and picture the invisible letter one last time. Every page has disappeared. Every sentence has faded beyond sight. Yet one gentle warmth continues to linger, as though the message refused to leave completely. That is because the most meaningful words were never meant to stay on paper. They were meant to become part of you. And somewhere, beyond what either of you can currently see, another chapter is quietly unfolding. The writer looks toward the horizon and smiles. Not because every question has been answered. Not because every path is perfectly clear. But because something inside finally feels at peace. The final reflection appears, not as writing, but as a whisper carried by the wind. I used to believe love was about finding the right moment. Now I understand it is about becoming the right person when the moment arrives. There is profound wisdom hidden inside those words. Life has a remarkable way of preparing people long before they recognize what they are being prepared for. Every challenge teaches resilience. Every delay teaches patience. Every unexpected turn teaches perspective. Looking back, even the difficult chapters begin to reveal quiet gifts that could not be seen at the time. Perhaps that has been true for you as well. Maybe there were moments that felt confusing. Conversations that ended without explanation. Dreams that seemed delayed. Only for life to reveal, much later, that every step had gently guided you toward greater clarity. The invisible letter knew this from the very beginning. That is why it never rushed you. It simply invited you to keep walking. Keep believing. Keep becoming. As the story reaches its final horizon, one last hidden page appears, not written by the mysterious writer, but by your own future self. The page contains only a single sentence. Thank you for not giving up before you discovered how strong your heart truly was. Read it again. Not as a prediction. As a reminder. Every new sunrise offers another opportunity to write a better chapter than yesterday. Every act of kindness creates ripples you may never fully witness. Every hopeful decision quietly reshapes tomorrow. That is the real secret the disappearing letter wanted to leave behind. Not the mystery of who wrote it, but the certainty that hope grows stronger whenever it is protected with patience. Before this journey gently comes to rest, carry one final thought with you. Whenever life feels uncertain, remember that the brightest stories are rarely revealed all at once. They unfold one page, one choice, one quiet act of courage at a time. And perhaps, months or even years from now, you'll remember this invisible letter. Not because of its mystery, but because it reminded you to keep your heart open, your spirit steady, and your eyes lifted toward possibility. The letter is gone. The pages have dissolved into light. The wind has carried away every visible word. Yet the message remains beautifully unchanged. You are not defined by yesterday. You are not limited by uncertainty. Your greatest chapters are still unwritten. Walk toward them with calm confidence. Smile at unexpected moments. Treasure genuine connections. And whenever hope quietly knocks at the door of your heart, welcome it. Because some letters disappear in 5 minutes. But the lives they inspire can continue writing themselves for years to come. This story ends here. Your next chapter is only beginning.